thanking you all for joining us early this morning. We're going to have a plenary, which is From Frameworks to Frontlines, Delivery in a Fragmented World. And to moderate this panel, we have Jennifer Morris from the Nature Conservancy. Jennifer, welcome to the stage. And you'll introduce your panelists.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Obviously, when you have a session that's going to talk about money, you see a lot of people leave the room, but we're going to have a phenomenal session this morning. This is going to be a really amazing group that I have the pleasure of introducing. First, I would like to introduce my dear friend, Andrew Steer. Andrew Steer, who's talking right now. Andrew Steer, Professor of Practice, the Global School of Sustainability and International Growth Center at the London School of Economics, and most recently, the CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund. Andrew, welcome to the stage. I should say Sir Andrew. Great. Next, I would like to have Lyndsay Harris-Kyei, the Vice President of Global Impact and Sustainability at ServiceNow, join me on the stage. Lyndsay, thank you for being here. Next, I would like to invite Vincent Charpio, the Executive Vice President and Head of Group Sustainability Accelerator at Capgemini. Welcome to the stage. And last but certainly not least, Kristin Hughes, the Global Sustainability Director at Diageo. Come on up. Okay, please take your seats. You want to sit? I know, it does. I'm not Oprah, there will not be car keys. Although we should have done that. That would have been an incentive for people to stay, right? Wonderful. Well, I just want to frame this session a little bit, because as you can see, it's from frameworks to frontlines, or as I've been saying at this COP, sort of pilots to progress. And I want to first recognize, and our esteemed colleagues, brothers and sisters from the indigenous communities have left the room, but I wanted to just recognize the importance and thank the World Climate Summit for inviting indigenous people to be here at this session, because I think that's what we're all about. Being here in Belém is to be closer to the front lines of the climate and biodiversity crisis, to actually hear the voices of the 3,000 indigenous people who have made it to this COP and are clearly expressing their views, but they need to be in these rooms. I'm glad that they're going to learn more about money, because indigenous people need direct access to financing. And I want us to just, as we go into this session and look at bridging the gaps between global and local, to really think about that. What are we doing as non-indigenous people, mostly in this room, to actually bridge that gap? That is what implementation is all about. So we're going to have a really robust conversation across a bunch of different sectors on this topic. And I really want to start, Andrew, with you. So Andrew Steer, many of you probably know Andrew. He's very famous in this world for many, many reasons. He's an incredible thought leader and has just done a phenomenal job in his career of doing exactly that, bridging the gap, whether it was his role at the World Resources Institute, of really talking about the systems change and developing some of the most important tools for monitoring, like Global Forest Watch, but really then also with the Bezos Earth Fund, getting money to the ground. So Andrew, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about how you see fairness in the systems, thinking over the long term, and how do we ensure that these international frameworks that we're all here negotiating, talking about, really make it to the ground and bridge those gaps?
Well, first, it's delightful to be here with this wonderful group of friends, and all of you as well, who are also friends. Look, I think it's important to understand the journey we're on intellectually, actually. I mean, we really did used to believe, and actually to some extent correctly, that it would be nice to act on climate change, but there are trade-offs involved. It's going to cost us more. We may lose jobs. And in particular, some of those less fortunate may lose their jobs as well. And so it was a framework of trade-offs. And this was like, I'm old enough to have been at the original Rio Earth Summit 33 years ago. Of course, I was very, very young.
A mere child.
And there, as these heads of state signed the Climate Change Convention, there was a recognition that we needed to do it, but at the same time, there was a recognition that it was going to be a cost. And then fast forward, do you remember we had the Stern report 18 years ago, 2007? And that said, actually, there could be a complementarity. It's a cost today, but there'll be gains later. But we're now in a third phase, which basically is a new economics and a new sort of social understanding, and that is that actually smart, bold actions on climate change lead to more economic efficiency, because we use resources more effectively. They drive new technology, they lower risk, and they reshape expectations about the future. And those four things combined actually lead to more investment, better jobs, more jobs, and a healthier economy. And here's the thing. Yesterday, there was a major report that was launched by the Brazilians and about 6 other countries. I have to say it because my wife actually wrote it. And it's on jobs. And basically, it turns out that if we do the transition the way we need to, there will be a net gain of 385 million jobs. And 280 of those will be in rural areas and mainly in the field of adaptation. And so actually what we're learning is that done right, we will have a fairer world than we have today. And one of the biggest problems we have is that we don't understand that very well. And that's what we need to do. And so whilst we should rightly talk about how do we get things on the front line, we also need to change our own mindsets. And that was what was so great about some of those statements earlier on.
Fantastic. That's exactly right. I mean, it's all about the economics, and that's really what drives behavior. So I want to turn, Kristin, now to you. You work at Diageo, one of the world's largest beverage companies. And clearly, jobs and the connections to, in particular, water is essential for the health of your company. How are you bridging that gap between the climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, supply chains, and economics in Diageo?
Great. Well, thank you, Jennifer, and wonderful to be here, as Andrew said, with friends. And thank you also for the introduction to Diageo. For those of you who don't know, we are one of the world's largest drinks manufacturers. We're also sponsoring a cocktail reception this evening, so you can try out some of the many Johnny Walker, Tanqueray, or even the local Ipioca Caipirinha. So please join us later for that. But all of those drinks require water as the #1 ingredient to make that. In addition, we need raw materials like grain, like sugarcane, barley to brew and distill. So each one of those relies very, very heavily on water. So it's by far our most important and key ingredient just for our license to operate and to keep us moving forward. And we know that it's critical for us then to build business resilience is to build climate resilience. And through that, we recognize the value and the importance of working throughout our supply chain. We have tens of thousands of suppliers around the world who we need to work with and we are building relationships with every day. When we think about here in the COP conversations, a lot of the discussion is really around carbon, decarbonization, and our scope 1 and 2, which of course is mostly in our own control, is only 6% of our carbon footprint. So 94% of our footprint is in our supply chain. So it's really critical that I build a relationship with our suppliers. And believe it or not, even out of those tens of thousands, only about 80 account for the highest percentage. So if we can get 80 suppliers doing the right thing, we're making a really great impact and improvement. At Diageo, we of course, any company, when you're in procurement, you negotiate a hard bargain, and we're constantly pushing our suppliers to drive better cost and to bring in better cash flow. But we also have a third C at Diageo, and it's carbon. So when we negotiate our procurement contracts, we are negotiating with our suppliers how they will address their carbon footprint. And we're working with them on our own product carbon footprints, so we can tell you exactly how much carbon goes into one of the drinks you'll have this evening, for example. And with them, we're designing and developing roadmaps And again, what I love about this COP is this is the COP for action, but we're saying let's not just make it about action, it's action for impact. And we know to get there, we must drive collective action. Andrew is talking about that with the local communities and driving that economic opportunities, but we see that as well. The collective action with our partners, with NGOs, with governments, local and federal, is the only way we'll actually drive that success.
Great. If I could ask a quick follow-up to that. So, we've heard a lot about some reversals in corporate commitments given the political climate, given economic stress, of course, tariffs, and then in the case of your company, changing drinking habits. I'm curious the stickiness of the corporate sustainability commitments at a company like Diageo, and how do we, as many people in the room, ensure that those commitments continue despite changing economics?
It's a great question because we absolutely are still very committed and we must have ambitious targets to move forward. But back to the point on collective action, we also know we can't reach our targets without the support of government, without the right policies, the infrastructures, even innovations. So we're seeking innovations and working with entrepreneurs and startups all the time to try to help us drive new change. So right now it's really critical, and you're right, it's a sticky issue. But even in the boardroom, our board, and we announced a new CEO the other day, and we're still very front-footed. We're still very focused on both 2030, 2040, and 2050 to reach net zero. But actually, as I said before, we simply can't do it alone.
Great, thank you so much. So Lyndsay, I might turn to you next. So you are at ServiceNow. And first, I'd love for you to maybe share with the audience a little bit about what your company does. But it's a technology company, and as a technology company, there's often a discussion about AI and all these things. But how do we make sure that technology is really reaching the ground and ensuring that we're bridging the gap between the global and the local here at COP?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for having us. It's a very exciting conversation today. So ServiceNow, for those of you that might not know, is a B2B, predominantly, software platform company. So I'm going to, in simplistic terms, what we do is we help your fragmented system. So you might have an HR system, you might have a finance system, but how do they actually work together so that your data will flow? That is the most simplistic way of explaining it. Obviously, it becomes much more complex when you start thinking about how your work flows and how your business operates. But truly, where we see opportunity is how do you start putting AI to work for people? So if your systems are talking, if your data is talking, how are we using agents to do some of those tasks so that your team and your people can be more strategic? So at ServiceNow, to kind of address what we're chatting about today, we think about technology as an enabler to help our customers solve some of their most critical issues. That's where we can lean in. I think it's incredibly important that all companies focus on what can they be good at. Diageo, water, incredibly important to your business. What's material to our business is that our customers can meet their goals and that we are integrating, sustainability and utilizing technology to really be the change that we need to see. So we do this in 3 ways with different sectors. So with our customers, we use our ESGM as well as our IRM tool to help with data flow when it comes to reporting. We all know that this takes hours of our employees' time. So we actually utilize our products to ensure that we go from spreadsheets to data flows, connecting your IT systems in so that your data can flow into ESGM to make reporting easier for everyone. That also includes controls, as we know, especially with EU CSRD becoming incredibly important. So how are you tracking all of those material topics and the controls that go along with them? We have customers such as National Grid, who has actually integrated their IT systems into ensuring that they're moving from spreadsheets and thinking about data flow and making better informed decisions around sustainability. That's kind of the luxury of having all of your tech stack kind of connected into one platform is you will understand much more efficiently what is happening within your business. For nonprofits, it can be a small nonprofit in South Africa like Ndlovu, who's tracking malnourished children on our platform over 20 years and determining if the interventions that they're doing are actually being effective. Or it could be a large, nature organization that is working with surfing communities around the globe because they're actually on the front lines of knowing what is happening in our coral reefs and actually being able to connect the data that they're seeing in local communities with climate scientists and with conservation initiatives. So it's really connecting that data, and that's the power of ServiceNow, is we're able to collect the data on the ground, connect it back to those doing the work that may not be in that exact location, but how are we starting to ensure that this data is flowing effectively and more efficiently and making sure that we're all being more sustainable? When it comes to governments, we often see there's a few use cases we have where, for example, Hurricane Ian, our team built within 36 hours an app to help. It's called missing.fl.gov, so that the government could help track and notify individuals for missing persons. That was built in 36 hours because we knew that we could get the people on the ground to alert the authorities when someone was missing, and we could be more effective. We have another use case where we have a government that during a disaster knew that they were going to have to streamline and create greater efficiencies around alerting people when issues had happened. So they actually created an app where an individual could go on, they could say, my house was flooded, I lost documentation, I lost my dog. The individual at the government agency would then pick that up, and then they would use agents to actually alert the correct agencies. So you're allowing an AI agent then to flow the information, and then the individual gets updated immediately. That's putting AI to work for people. So we're consistently thinking about how are we actually utilizing our technology and connecting the entire ecosystem, but truly it comes down to access. It comes down to ensuring that everyone has access to the digital economy, which is really where we think about our handprint, is how are we actually working across the globe and really thinking about sustainable infrastructure and how we're investing in sustainable infrastructure. So the individuals who do not have access to the digital economy can join this revolution and ensure that they can adapt and be resilient and also join the digital economy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really important work as we look more towards building resiliency in our economies and actually helping people on the front lines. That's a great example of how we can find missing people as fast as possible using technology for good. So thank you so much for that. Vincent, I want to turn to you now. So you are at Capgemini, and you do a lot around delivery architecture. So I'm curious what that looks like in practice for us. How can this digital transformation that we were just talking about and system innovation really build momentum for frontline resilience?
Yeah, thank you, and happy to be with you all. Echoing what Lyndsay just said, just for those of you who don't know Capgemini, we are one of the largest IT and consulting engineering professional services company in the globe, partnering with companies like ServiceNow and SAP and Google and etc. So what Lyndsay says is definitely aligned with our vision in terms of helping clients, leveraging technology to deliver a better world, and putting sustainability at front and center in their business strategy. What Kristin said is as a strong link to what we bring to our clients, and Sir Andrew said it as well. We are at the time of the eco-digital era. There's no option not to embed sustainability in every large digital transformation. It was a nice to have before. I need to report, I set targets, I need to report and comply with ServiceNow, for example, but now it's about demonstrating that those KPIs, those objectives are embedded in the business strategy of our clients. And if you look at it, sustainability delivers tangible business value today. We have been publishing a lot of research at Capgemini for the last few years. 60+% of large corporations across the globe will invest more in sustainability transformation. Why? Because it brings innovation, it brings top-line growth, it brings cost reduction, so bottom-line improvement, it improves brand equity and return to shareholders. I'm not saying that because I'm biased, I'm saying that because the data is proving that trends, and I'm very optimistic that today, and that's the scope of impact and action, we have all it takes to make it happen. We need to bridge the gap to bring more countries and communities to embrace the digital economy, but we have all it takes to continue funding those digital transformations. Let me give you a couple of examples. Number one, we have the data today. It was not the case 10 years back, right? We know across the supply chain what is a risk. in terms of resources, in terms of climate impact. Think about it, more than 80% of companies last year only were somehow impacted by the climate disaster across their value chain. It costs $1 trillion in 25 only to help rebuild the economy. Wildfire in South California, flooding in France, you name it, hurricanes in Florida. That directly impact our community, but also the economy, and impact the GDP growth. Number two, we have the data to help companies like Diageo rethink their product, to reduce the use of water, to reduce the use of raw material, to reduce the energy consumption of their products, hence reduce the impact on their Scope 3 emission or any other KPI beyond carbon. Number three, we have the data to help understand what matters for the youth and why they will join this company and not that company. We have the data to demonstrate that sustainable investment has a really strong impact on the attractiveness of a given organization. And youth today, they are not joining a company because of their product or because of their, what they've been doing for 50 years. They're going to join a company for their purpose. Is my CEO really committed to delivering what they say in their sustainability report? Are they serious about it? And guess what? Technology is helping us enable all of that.
Fantastic. Well, so well said. And I think that the last point you brought up is a really important theme. And I'm looking around the audience and seeing how many youth representatives we have. And there's a few, but there you go. Exactly. Are you a youth too? Okay. Great. So I think this is a really important conversation, and as we are seeing greater activism, having the data to actually understand what's working is so critical, and obviously thinking about the kind of resiliency economy that we need to create, thinking about all these themes. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to do a lightning round with all of you. I'm going to start with you, Kristin, on what would be, so as we're thinking about, the COP of impact and implementation and speed and action, what would be the one thing that you think should come out of COP that you can bring back to Diageo to make sure that you're speeding towards positive impact?
Love that question. When you think about the different COPs we've had, there were some where we were setting big, broad, like Paris helped us with a big, big overarching agreement. And then other COPs where we were really proud because we were making commitments and people were signing up for things. This is the COP for action. And so for me, coming out of this and to be super proud to take back to the board and the exec at Diageo, I'd love to build and deliver an unlikely collaboration. I think it's clear sometimes the collaborations that we create, whether it's with another CPG or even another water organization, but actually the technology here that can help us unlock opportunities, that's unusual, right? So for me to take something like that back to Diageo and actually build it and deliver it, that would be success.
Great. Vincent?
That's an invitation, by the way.
Yeah.
So we're going to meet soon then. We published a couple of years back with the WEF a document called No Excuse Framework. I think it's their time today. People stating that they don't have the data to move, that's not true. It's no longer an excuse not to have the information. So let's move on. We have the technology. It's about collaboration with the right ecosystem between companies like Diageo, Capgemini, or ServiceNow, to name a few. But it won't be a one company or one guy job. It has to take all of us to make it progress fast.
Great. Lyndsay?
Well, Kristin, we might have something that we need to both take back, because I do think technology can bring us all together on the macro level. I think we need to make it easier for funders to find projects, for governments to work with their citizens, and really start thinking about how do we bridge the gap between the projects that we need to happen and those that have the capital to do so. And how do we start using technology to do this? The examples I shared are on a micro level, right? Company by company and the work that we can be doing, but how do we make that bigger? How do we bring that to the macro level? And how do we start breaking down the silos that just naturally exist? Because let's face it, collaboration is hard. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of collaboration, and it takes a lot of human capital. So I think we really need to start breaking down those silos and utilize technology to make the world work better for all of us so that we have the world we envision and not the one we currently have.
Well said. Andrew?
Well, we want to agree on governments doing good things, but equally important, we want to stop governments doing stupid things. And unfortunately, we do too many of those. the IMF tells us that we spend over $1 trillion a year subsidizing, essentially paying people to do really silly things, more fossil fuels, for example. And so we need a total mindset that we have to find a way of voting for governments that do good things and stop doing silly things. And the question is, how would we do that? And it's all about fairness, about future generations. And what you said about young people is right. And the question is, if we could find a way of giving votes to future generations, we would sort things out quite quickly. And the question is, how do you do it? Now, some have suggested like a commission should be set up to represent, but there's a simpler way. It turns out that actually women have a much, sadly, I'm embarrassed to say this, they have a much greater sense of future generations. And so how about giving women 2 votes in every country for every vote that a man gets?
Yeah, that deserves some applause.
And if we did that, we wouldn't be in a situation today where, you know, we Americans, we account for 4% of the population, and half of that, 2% of the world's population, voted for American policies today. And we're allowing those 2% to influence the other 98%. Isn't that crazy? But I tell you, if we change the voting structure, we would be in a much, much better state.
Well, that is brilliant. And these are exactly the kind of ideas, big, bold, game-changing, that we need to have at the World Climate Summit, because the time is now. We know the issues are more urgent than ever. I want to thank this incredible panel for being here with us today. And let's keep up the conversation, but more importantly, the action, the collaboration. So you all in this room, talk to somebody you don't know. Explore new ideas and new collaborations. And thank you so much for having us. It's great.